All right. Well, back again for another live. We're actually streaming live on. We're streaming live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube all at the same time right now. All right. So you can pick this up on any platform. Great for you. Great for you. So glad that you have chosen to watch this, and I do hope that in some small way this would be an encouragement to you. And if you're one out there right now that was whose marriage is struggling and you're not sure whether it can be saved, or whether you want to save it, or even if it's worth saving, even if it's worth saving, well, then need to have some indication that it is worth saving, that it can be saving. It's kind of futile to save something that can't be saved, right? If your partner is 100% out, 100% out, there's not a lot you can do to save something, all right? That's just the way life is. We say this way in our world, takes two to make an us and only one to kill it, all right? Two to make an us, one to kill it. The most important part of marriage it aren't the spouses, it's us. When us wins, you both win, and us lose, you both lose. But if you really want to have a healthy, strong sense of usness in your marriage, you've got to know how to love well. But in order to love well, you got to know how to relate well. The problem is most people don't know how to relate well. Because they don't know how to relate well, they can't love well. You see, because to love well requires you learning how to relate well. And by that, we mean you got to learn how to be an emotional mature adult. You got to be able to handle conflict with maturity, which is about emotional development. You got to be able to communicate maturely. You've got to be able to listen maturely. And so our program, Relate Well, www.relatewell.us, we actually teach the skills, all right, for healthy connect relationships. But what if your marriage isn't there? What if your marriage is struggling? What if your marriage is at a place where you're not even sure that you want it? There's a part of you that wants out. There's a part of you that wants to run. There's a part of you that says, enough's enough. What are some signs that you actually can save your marriage? What are some signs that your marriage is worth saving? And that's what we want to talk about on this live. And take some notes if you'd like, and let's kind of jump right in and talk about those things. All right. I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, not ask you, let's say it this way. Let me kind of change it. I think the first thing is when you can be honest with yourself that in you actually still have feelings of love for that person. When you know that you have feelings of love for that person, that means that's one sign that your marriage is worth saving. Don't throw it away if there's a part of you that still has things of love, that still has a sense of hope, that still um, that still that still cares. That means you're not 100% out yet. There's a part of you that's still in. There's a part of you that still wants something. And I always say you owe it to yourself to honor that part of you. All right. And so one sign your marriage that we're saving is when you still have those feelings of love. Now, does that mean when I still have feelings of love for you that I feel those feelings all the time? No, no, because in the moment your partner may be treating you in a very disrespectful and caring way. They may be very controlling, they may be very manipulative, and it's hard to feel love for someone when they're disrespecting you or treating you with ill will. All right, and so, but when you can step back from that and say, you know what, in the midst of all this craziness, I still love you. I still care. That's one sign your marriage is worth saving. You see, keep fighting for it. Keep doing the things you need to do. That's what we teach and relate well, what to do different. All right. So one sign is that you still have feelings of love for your partner. And when you do, that's a sign you might want to keep fighting this thing. Secondly, I got my little notes right over here. When you know, and this is going to be tough now, ready? Another sign that your marriage is worth saving is when you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have contributed to the problems in the marriage. It's one thing if all the issues are really related to them, and there are issues that are related to that person. All right. Um, However, there is a part of you that can say, you know what, I have contributed to this thing. Maybe you've been neglectful. Maybe you have been disrespectful. Maybe you've treated your partner out of anger and hurt. Maybe you've been selfish. Maybe you've had expectations that weren't met, and then you kind of beat them up for it because they didn't meet your expectations. Maybe they're not meeting your needs, so you didn't meet their needs. There's this idea of bartering. I don't love you unconditionally. I love you as long as you do what I want. And if I give, then you're supposed to give. Actually, that's not love. That's bartering. It's like going to McDonald's. You give them money, they give you hamburgers. It's the same thing. It's an economic exchange. Love is more than that. And I can look back at my marriage in the early days when we were kind of growing and learning how to connect and how to bond. I didn't know how to love well. Never really experienced it growing up in my home, and so I was selfish. I was manipulative. And though we had some struggles in the early days, I'll be honest, I contributed a lot to it. I really did. And I realized, wow, who am I to point a finger? Who am I to throw a stone at her when I can be stoned myself? You see, who am I to keep looking at the toothpick in her eye when I got this massive log in my own eye? That's why I say it always takes a lot more courage to look in the mirror than it does to look out the window. But one of the signs is when you know that you've done some things that you've contributed to the problem. Because that now allows me to quit focusing on the other person and allow me to start focusing on what I do that contributes to this thing. And you might find out you'll need to go ask for forgiveness. You might have to move to repentance and seek forgiveness for things that you've done to hurt your partner, all right, your spouse. Another one is, uh, um, and this can be tough. Um, let's say someone is cheated, they've committed adultery because they're looking for something. They're angry or hurt or looking for love, whatever it is, and they found out it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. This is going to be a really tough thing to say right now for many of you to hear, but I need to say it. Adultery is a deep betrayal of love. It's a deep betrayal to the relationship. However, it is not a death knell. It's not the death bell for your marriage. Many marriages can be saved and healed from adultery. This is very important for you to grasp. Just because a person cheated doesn't mean the marriage is over. Oh, you've got a lot of work to do, and you've got a lot of trust has to be built back, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of work to do. But just because a person's cheated doesn't mean the marriage is over, particularly when that person did it and found out it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. What they thought was, the idea of grass is green on the other side, found out that it really wasn't. I always like to jokingly say the only reason the grass is greener over there is because there's more manure. You see, many people who've committed adultery found out it wasn't all they thought it was going to be. The secrecy, the deception, the lying, they became somebody they didn't want to become. And so, just because someone cheated doesn't mean the marriage is over. Some people found out it wasn't what they thought it was being. You may say, you know what, I still love you. And I still want to fight for these feelings of love. And here's something I also found out throughout my 30 years of work. Just because someone cheated did not mean they didn't love their spouse. Now, behavior wise, it does. But in reality, that person still could love them. Even though they cheated, they're out there trying to get their needs met in help unhealthy, immature ways at the expense of the usness in their marriage. And so just because a person cheated Some people found out it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. So adultery in itself is not a reason to throw the marriage away. All right, it can still be saved. Now, does the offending spouse need to be remorseful? Yes. Do they need to stop the relationship? Yes. Do they need to start building trust back? Trust? Yes. So again, healing from it is a lot of work, but it's not a death blow. All right. And another one, another sign that your marriage can be saved is when both of you, on some level, still want your family. You don't want to hurt the kids. You don't want a broken family. Maybe you grew up in a broken family and didn't want one yourself. I grew up I grew up in divorce. I grew up in a broken home. I grew up in craziness. There was abuse. Luella grew up in alcoholism and divorce. Her mom and dad had both of them had two divorces. All right. They weren't real healthy. In Luella, I never really saw healthy, mature love. All right. And so we came together. But I know this, one of the reasons I would always fight for my marriage, even when we were in our rough times, it's number one, I was not passing on divorce to myself or my children. I wanted my family. I wanted me. I wanted Luella. I wanted an us. And I wanted our family together. I never, ever, 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 ever wanted my kids to have to go through divorce and experience what we went through as kids. Brokenness, being passed from family to family, and from this family to that family, weekend to weekend. It is not a way to live. And yet many kids endure it. Why? Because one of their parents was selfish enough or did something and just threw it away. You know, nobody gets married to be miserable. Nobody gets married to destroy a family. Happens all the time. Why? Man, because we don't value relationships anymore in the West. We value being right and wrong. I always say it this way, but we don't value relationships anymore. But when you have a desire for your family and your partner has a desire for the family, I bet it can be saved. Why? Because there's something you both want beyond yourself. And my hunch is when a person wants the whole family embedded in that desire for the family is a desire for the marriage. Why? Because a family is only as strong as the marriage is strong. Marriage strong, family strong. Marriage weak and broken, family weak and broken. It's real simple. It's not rocket science, all right? And so another sign that your marriage is worth saving is when you both want the family. Even if just one of you wants to fight for it. You know, it does take two to make an us and one to kill it. But remember, one person can fight for it. All right. Another sign that your marriage is worth saving is when, even though there's conflict, you both still do things that bring you joy. You still both do things together. Maybe you go out to dinner still. Maybe you go for a walk still. Maybe you sit and watch TV still. There are some things you still enjoy doing together. And because you still enjoy doing some things together, that's a real indication that you don't really want to be alone. You don't want to be apart. Um, that there's still some things that I enjoy about us, enjoy about you. And it just begs the question: are those things worth fighting for? Are those things worth investing in? 2004 and 2005 were probably the worst 2 years of my marriage. And we've married 37 years as of today when I'm doing this live with you. 2004, 2005, worst 2 years of our marriage. We had a lot to work through. Unconsciously, what I did not know in that journey of healing is that I had a father wound that was playing itself out unconscious to me. So I had to deal with those pieces, but I had to deal with some pieces within myself as well: my anger, my hurt, resentments, my fears, my insecurities, a lot of things. But even though we had some really really rough times during that 2 year span, um, we still like going out. We still like sitting and talking. I still like at the end of the day being next to her in bed. I still like being wake up next to her. There are things that I enjoy doing with Luella, and she still enjoyed doing with me. Now, I'm not saying everything was hunky dory, wonderful. Got it? There were struggles. There were times that you didn't feel the love. I remember one time that I was really, really struggling, and you didn't feel the love. Right? That old song. I talk about it a lot. The righteous brothers, you lost that love and feeling. We hadn't had it in a while. And I was sitting on the bed, just kind of reminiscing and sulking, if you will, because I hadn't felt it, and you could feel the brokenness in the relationship, the woundedness. And Laura came, sat down next to me, and put her hand on my knee, and she says, I don't like you. To be honest, folks, I really wasn't a lot of like. I wasn't real likable back in those days. I was angry, hurt, had a lot of resentments, and rightly so. Some of the things that I was resentful for were true. She did do. However, she said, I don't like you. She said, but I do love you, and we'll get through this together. Boy, did those words take me for months. I mean, months. There were words of security, words that she still approves of me, words that I'm still acceptable. And I'm still acceptable to her. Words that says, we're going to get through this together. Because we still did some things together that we still enjoyed. We had to deal with the problems. But one of the ways you're able to do things together is having the maturity to say, look, we have this issue, but let's not let the issue destroy us all the way around. We have a friendship. Let's preserve the friendship no matter what. You know, Luella didn't date me for about two and a half years. She said I wasn't what she wanted in terms of a romantic partner and all that kind of stuff. Way back in, back in the 1980s, early 80s, when we were in our early 20s. However, we had a friendship. She was my friend, and I enjoyed my friendship with her. I've learned about marriage right now. And even though you have struggles, never sacrifice the friendship. One of the reasons I would always fight for my relation, fight for my marriage is if I was to throw the marriage away and get rid of the marriage, I would lose my closest friend. I really would. The person who knows me best and loves me, tolerates me. You see, when you still do things together that bring back moments of joy, that bring back feelings of togetherness, that bring back the sense of, I like being in your presence. When you do those things together, that bring back those moments of feelings of joy, of peace, of kinship, of love, you decide that, what, I want the friendship. I want to fight for this thing. And so another point there is when you still do things together that bring you joy. Now, next point, next sign is you can still be open and vulnerable with each other. Now that's important, that you can still be open and vulnerable with each other. See, intimacy cannot happen without being emotionally open to another person. To be emotionally open to somebody is to be vulnerable. When people are in conflict, they shut down emotionally. And when you shut down emotionally, you're going to distance emotionally, but you'll also distance physically. Because the brain has to have two things to bond another person: emotional openness and physical closeness. You got to have both. And even though you're in conflict, you can still be open to each other. But you have to challenge the fears, though, because listen, when you're in conflict, there's a party that's afraid to be open emotionally. True story. True story. So back in the 2004, 2005 time frame, which was the worst 2 years of my marriage, um, we went to bed, and it was that worst 2 year time frame. Not a lot of feeling of us, and I learned from my teachers and mentors. You got to have emotional openness and physical closeness in order to feel a bond, to create a bond. But when you're hurting and fear of being hurt more, You don't tend to be emotionally open, right? So here we are. She's laying with her back next to me. And I kid you not, from 10 to 2 in the morning, I kept thinking this in my head. All you gotta do is roll over, put your arm around her. Just gotta be emotionally open and physically close. That's all you need. And for 4 hours, literally, I kid you not, from 10 to 2, I wouldn't do it. You wanna know why? I wasn't angry. I was afraid. I was afraid to be emotionally open and try and connect to her, rolling over and scooting behind and put my arm around her. What was I afraid of? Rejection. Rejection. That if I did it, she'd shun me. She'd push me away. You see, when you get to a place that you cannot be open and vulnerable with each other at all, that's probably a sign the marriage is over, the relationship's over. So what did I do? About 2 o'clock in the morning, this I know it's a true story. About 2 in the morning, I realized I was giving into fear. By the way, fear will rob you of intimacy. Fear will rob you of vulnerability because fear will shut your heart down and distance yourself. And here I was for 4 hours, laying awake at night, wrestling in my own head, saying, all you gotta do is roll over, emotional openness, physical. I kept telling myself that. And then around 2 in the morning, I got so mad at myself for being afraid. I lived in fear most of my life, even as a kid. Always afraid of being shocked with a cow prod, afraid of being put down by my stepmother, which she did regularly, my dad. And I got angry that I was being afraid. So what did I do? In my anger, it giving into fear, my anger motivated me. I rolled over and put my arm around her, expecting rejection. You know what happened? She took my hand. She took my hand and held it. And then I was mad at myself for wasting 4 hours of sleep. When you both have the ability to be emotionally open and vulnerable with each other, it's worth saving. It is worth saving. Don't throw it away. Fight for it. Because when you both can still be emotionally open with each other, it sends the message that I care, that I still love you, that I still value you. It's worth fighting for. All right. Oh, here's another one. Another sign is when you still desire to have sex with them. That's right. When you still desire to have sex with them, that's worth saving. It's when you've lost the desire and want nothing to do with them physically and sexually. That's a good sign. But when there is a part of you that still wants to be close, that still wants to have sex, that's a sign. There's a part of you that wants to be close to them. Honor that part of you. Honor that part of you. And this is the last one. And in my mind, this is the most important one because this one will the others will flow out of this one. When there is a part of you that can still see yourself being us with them, when you can still see yourself being us, you know, one of the things that I always want to make sure in my marriage is that we're an us, not me, not her, but us. When us wins, we both win. Us lose, we both lose. But when you can see yourself being an us, when Luella and I had our worst time in 2004, 2005, we were emotionally very distant during this time. We both had a lot to grow through, particularly me. However, I always wanted to be an us with her. Never not wanted to be. And I knew we had a lot to work through. And I knew that if I did the other things, I saw the other things and learn, and by the way, in Relate Well, our curriculum, we actually teach the strategies, how to build on us and protecting us and us in conflict. I knew if I stuck to those things, the skills and tools, the principles, we could get our essence back. I knew we could get the essence back. It may take some time. And there were times in that 2 years time frame that we would feel in us, but we still had a lot to work through. But you want to know something? Because I still believe we can be in us and still desire to be in us, it was worth fighting for. It was worth fighting for. There was some research released a long time ago. I've never forgot it. And the data was that people who marry today don't see themselves being married when they die. They hope that they're married when they die. Whereas the generation before me, when they married, they saw themselves being married till the day they die. That's not true anymore. Young people today hope they're going to be married long term. That's the effects of divorce in the culture, you see. I came to marriage going, we're going to be together till death do us part. Why? I ain't living the way I grew up, and I don't want to. I love her, and I don't want to have to live my life apart from her. I told her years ago when we first got married, I said, by the way, I just want you to know something. If you ever leave me, I am going with you. All right? Divorce and separation is not an option. We're going to make this happen. And so I always saw ourselves being in us. I love it when us is in the house. When us is in the house, you feel the love, you feel the tenderness, you feel the compassion, you feel the nurturing. You see, the way you know that us is in the house is you feel it. You feel its presence, and the way you know it's not in the house is you feel its absence. When us is not in the house, you feel the angst, you feel the tension, you feel the resentment, you feel the bitterness, you feel the coldness, you feel the silence. You see, everybody knows when us is in the house because you feel its presence and you feel its absence. Your kids know when us is in the house. But in conflict, even though you may not feel us, this is important, even though you may not feel the usness, there is within you the desire to be in us. There is the desire to be the us. And because there's still the desire to be the us, that's motivation. Then I say, then since you still desire to be in us, focus on that desire and do what it starts to take to build it. Rather than operate out of the wounded part of you, operate out of the part that's still desiring. That's not living in denial, because I don't believe in denial. That's not negating how I think or feel, because we have to honor how we think and feel. Don't dishonor how you think and feel. But if you have that desire still to be in us and you see yourself still being in us, it's worth saving. It's worth saving. Sadly, and it's still true, when you can no longer see yourself being in us, when you no longer desire to be in us, when that part of you is completely gone, 100%, you're probably right. The marriage is probably over. You know, sometimes, particularly in the church world, there's that Bible verse says God hates divorce, and he does. And yet they'll use that as a justification to not divorce. Folks, let me say it this way. I hate divorce with a passion, all right? I'll do whatever I can to help couples rebuild the sense of usness. But staying married just because God hates divorce and you don't have any love in the marriage, don't fool yourself. God's not impressed. He's impressed that there's love in the marriage, not that you don't divorce. Not divorcing means nothing. Love means everything. And so if you're staying married just because God hates divorce, well, that means I don't really see us being in us and I don't want to be in us, but I'm doing it for these reasons. That's called commitment by constraint, but long-term, those marriages don't make it. They just don't make it. You want a healthy, strong marriage where you can see yourself being in us. And you feel that, and that's a feeling of desire and love. You see, these are the signs. These are the signs that your marriage can make it. So let me kind of run through them real quickly here. When you still have feelings of love for your partner, that's a sign. Number two, when you know you've contributed to the issues, when you know you're also part of the problem, don't throw it away. You can save the marriage. Just fix your part, what you've done. If you cheated or your partner cheated, committed adultery, and found out that what you're looking for wasn't what was really over there, It wasn't as green as you thought it would be. And there's a sense of regret, and you really do love your partner and want the marriage, it's a sign it can be saved. All right. When you desire your whole family, you don't want divorce because you don't want your kids to go through it. You desire being the whole, you, your spouse, and your children. Sign to save it. When you still do things together that bring back feelings of joy, that bring back moments of joy, when you still have those things that you do together, it's a sign to save it. When you can still be open and vulnerable with each other, it's a good sign to save it. All right. When you still desire, or whatever level, to have sex with them, be intimate with them, be close to them. And lastly, when you can still see yourself being an us. Those are some signs that you can use to determine whether your marriage is worth saving. And by the way, if you're in deep distress and counseling is not helping, you come check us out. Uh, at Relate Well, and we teach people the skills and tools on how to save a marriage. All right, we teach you the how tos. If you don't know how, we'll teach you how. All right, we do marriage intensives to take couples who are in divorce or high distress, where traditional therapy hasn't worked, and in 3 days, 3 long days. Actually, they're not long. Actually, they're 3 days, but they go rather quickly. But in 3 days, we'll teach you everything you know, and we'll show you how to reconnect, how to rebond, how to get the feelings of love back so you have hope again. And once you have a sense of hope, you know for a fact it can be saved. So then, hopefully this has been helpful for you. Hopefully it's been informative. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks.